Okay, so today I wanted to talk about what an emergency kitchen looks like, what you need to have in your emergency kitchen, and what you really don't need to have in your emergency kitchen. Because a lot of times when we're doing prepping things, we're thinking gadgetry. And the longer I'm in my tiny house, the longer I'm in my tiny kitchen, the more I'm like, okay, let's keep it simple, because in reality, the more gadgets you have, the more random tools you have, the more water you need. And water is a really, really precious commodity when you are off-grid. We're really blessed, or we had a lot of foresight when we got to our property. Is that a little less loud? Okay, hey Danny, how are you? Hey Sandra, hey Mandy. So when we first got to our home, I think it was the second year we lived here, we found out that you can put in your own hand pump on your well down to 300 feet, and that was one of the first things we did, and it was super inexpensive. And it's called the Freedom Pump is the one we have, and it's just PVC. It's not expensive cast iron. It's not $6,000. It's a lot easier to lift and lower than a regular hand pump. And we have our water in gallon, we've got plastic stuck on it, in gallon jugs. And that's how we haul it, because it's light for the kids, it's not too much water, and we can get it cycled through in a day. Water is a big deal. We go through about 6 gallons of water a day for our own personal use. We go through probably 1 gallon a day as far as drinking water, and then we have 3 gallons a day that we use for washing. So I do have my kitchen set up right here, and I can show it to you. I don't know if you guys are going to be super grossed out to see it, but this is reality. So I'm going to show it to you. So this is my washing water, and I have some other dishes here. And then underneath here is where I have everything that's already been washed. So I keep it all very close, and there's a pretty finite amount of space that I use. You can use 2 bowls. But the way that I do mine is that I have my hot washing water in here with my soap, and when I'm ready to rinse, I just rinse with my warm tea kettle. And I'm not sure which one uses more or less water, but it still uses very little water. I probably use 1 quart of water for all my rinsing after a meal, and we probably use 1.5 quarts of water for the wash water, and then we go pour it out underneath the cottonwood tree. It does matter what kind of tree you're pouring it under. Some trees are very, very sensitive. Even if you're using cast iron soap, it does work as a slight herbicide, which means that it will kill things if they're not really tenacious and if they're not used. I think cottonwoods do really well with alkaline, and I believe that's what happens when you put soap in the soil, is that it raises your alkalinity. Danny said you can easily make a Berkey from buckets, but you do need the filters. My parents made one that way, and it actually has worked for them very, very well. So good point. You do need your little filters, but you can put them into buckets. Very good point, though. And you can make water filters in other ways with sand and charcoal and that kind of thing. But for today's purposes, so you saw my little counter of shame showing you that I have some dishes that haven't been washed. But the other trick is have very few dishes, and try as hard as you can to have things be glass and metal, not plastic. Plastic, it's very hard to sterilize it, and you don't want it leaching things into your food. So let's make sure that I've gone all the way down. Okay, I have. So this pretty table, let's see if I can adjust my camera again. This pretty table kind of showcases all of my most special tools that I use. And the first thing is my pressure cooker. The reason for this is that you can make just about anything in a pressure cooker. And let's see if I can find my basket. Okay. Whoops. So this is a water-saving device. It doesn't look like a water-saving device, but it is a water-saving device. This is my little steaming basket, which means that I can put 2 cups. You always need in a pressure cooker at least 2 cups of liquid. You can put 2 cups of liquid, and the reason I like this one is because it opens and closes, meaning that I can put it in a very small pot or I can put it in a very large pot. I don't have to own more than 1 steamer. And then I put it inside. And then you add 2 cups of water. for whatever you're cooking, as long as you're steaming it. If you're going to be pressure cooking it, you also need 2 cups of liquid, but it could be something like chicken, a bone broth, or it could be, what else would you put in? Bone broth or water. You don't want to use milk because milk is going to curdle and burn, and the point of the pressure cooker is to pressurize. It's not for simmering, really. Hey, Tom Brown, how are you? So, pressure cooker. The one that I like is a Fagor, and I've had it for 2 years now. The only thing we've ever had to replace on it is that inside the handle there are these little nuts, and at one point when we were living in the RV and traveling across the country, we had to replace that little nut, but that is it. It has been an amazing tool. I cook in it things like pot roast. When I'm not using a steamer basket, you still need 2 cups of fluid, whether it be, again, some kind of broth or water. Again, you don't want it to be milk based. And you can do a pot roast in it. You can steam potatoes so that you can use them later for hash browns or for mashed potatoes. You can steam squash in it. You can steam apples in it. And if you use, where's one of my jars? So if you put zucchini bread or something into a glass jar, you don't put the lid on, but you put it into a glass jar and put it into your pressure cooker, it will actually cook bread. It doesn't do yeast bread really well because it's a moist heat. It kind of, you don't get a crust on it, but you can put, I'm trying to remember if it was like a quarter that you fill it. You'd have to look it up. There's all sorts of recipes out there, but we have done it. You fill your quick bake bread like banana bread or zucchini bread up to a certain line. You put this into your pressure cooker and then it steams it and you can make bread. So you can make everything off of this. The one thing that this doesn't do is that if you were cooking over an open fire, these would melt. Your plastic handles would melt. So if in your emergency preps you're wanting to do something that is going to be open over an open fire and you're not going to manage it, like this could cook really well if you had something for it to sit on that would direct the open flames away from the handle. But if you're going to do a lot of open fire cooking, cast iron is really your best bet, but it takes, oh my gosh, open fire cooking takes a long time. And it takes constant management, and if it's summer, you're going to have a risk of fire, especially if you're out in grasslands or you have any kind of vegetation around your home, any kind of wind. If you're going to be relying on that, I would be concerned. A much more efficient way to cook would be a rocket stove oven, which Paul Wheaton is putting one on right now, and we'll try and get the link to that. I have it in one of my videos from a couple days ago. But he's doing a rocket stove oven that is insulated and outside, so your flame is controlled. Instead of it being an open fire where embers can fly out, you've got a controlled stove that's very small and efficient. And that's really important. Efficiency is important because I don't want to be the housewife, the pioneer wife who has to sit and cook 18 hours a day because she's over an open fire and she has to keep it managed. I have other things I'd like to do. I'd like to do some spinning. I'd like to go take care of the goats and get the goats milked. And that means that I need to be able to come in and have my cooking be as fast and as efficient off-grid as it is on-grid, which it is right now. We use a lot of propane, but we also have the rocket stove where we're using wood, and I really want to have an outdoor rocket stove that would allow me to cook things. Right now, the propane oven can be blown out somewhat easily if I don't have plastic up on the deck. And so it's not an ideal system, especially since the plastic on the deck kind of holds the heat in a little bit in the summer. So having an outdoor kitchen is ideal. Let's see. Oh, and the other thing is, I do love Kasoris and Instapots and things like that. I do love those because you can put the timer on them. But if you're off grid, you need one of these. And so I don't have my Kasori here. My husband has it. And you kind of need to think through those. If you don't have the right tools, you're not going to be as comfortable. And sometimes the tools are expensive. But if you get kind of sometimes if you get the old-fashioned tools that haven't been modernized a little bit, they're not efficient and sometimes they're not safe. This is stainless steel. It is not aluminum. I don't want aluminum in my food. And for instance, old scythes. There are old scythes you can find at antique stores that they're not fantastic, but you can get new scythes now that are perfect and wonderful and ergonomically correct, and they follow the old model, but they're improved upon. And the same thing goes for things like cooking over an open fire. Don't cook over an open fire unless it is your last resort, because it is not fuel efficient. You can endanger yourself with needing to babysit the fire, and you're wasting your own time. And comfort matters. If you're off-grid, comfort really, really matters. You want to be comfortable, and you don't have to have electricity in order to be able to do that. So let's see, were there any questions? You like my spice rack? Those are all jars that I just put into I can tilt it up for you a little bit. Those are all jars that I put into the bottom of my little rough cut lumber shelf that we did. Oh, thank you, Catherine. Yes, so I want to put in, even though I already have a rocket stove oven that sits on top of my rocket mass heater, and even though I have the propane stove out here that my aircrete oven sits on top of, I want one that's outside, because when it does get hot in here, it's unpleasant. And I would like another alternative for summer cooking that isn't propane. And I will be trying to build one this summer if I have enough time. Hey, Patty. Okay, so I want to get on to the next thing. The next thing is a tea kettle, and this one looks a little greasy. Sorry, I've been cooking right next to it. You want a tea kettle because of this. It will alert you to when your water's boiling. If you're not alerted to when your water's boiling, you have water being wasted. You never want to waste your water. The other thing is that you want to be able to come and turn it off as soon as possible to conserve your propane. And you want to come and get started on your dishes, whatever it is that you're doing with your water. I make a lot of tea. We do drink water straight from the well. It is a private well, but I like to drink tea in order to have a desire to stay hydrated a little bit more. So I'm constantly making tea. And if I was worried about our water source, I would want this to also boil all of our other drinking water too. Again, a Berkey would be a very good idea. So I highly recommend having the biggest tea kettle you can find, though. We had one that you could pour 3 quarts into, and I loved that one because I never ran out of hot water. This small one is the best we've been able to do. I haven't been able to find an enormous tea kettle except on Amazon, and that one, I'm trying to remember what happened. I dropped it in the RV the first year we were out. I broke the handle, and I was very disappointed because we were also boiling water in the RV rather than turning on the hot water heater. It was easier just to stick it on the stove and boil it there. And I think cute matters. Cute and quality. Don't get aluminum. Don't get something that's chintzy. Get something quality, and then it will last you for so long. But there's my tea kettle. You notice everything is in red. We have so much brown and blue and purple in the house that I'm having to feng shui it up a little more with a little more red. Hey, Victoria, thank you so much. Tom Brown has the same kettle. It's a nice kettle. I think I got this one from Walmart, like, I don't know, last year? I think I got it last year when my big kettle broke. All right, so the next thing is hydration. If you're going to have water, if you're going to have tea, whatever you're going to have, don't pour your tea, don't put your tea bag in this, because you're going to use this again to wash your dishes. You're going to take your tea and put it into a teapot or something else that will allow you to then use your teapot, because you use this for everything. Keep it available. Remember, whenever you're going to take something that's glass and you're going to put hot water into it, pour a tiny bit of hot water in it, swirl it around, wait for it to warm up a little bit, and then pour your boiling water into it. Otherwise, you're going to crack things. And a lot of the things that I get that I use in my house are secondhand. I have very little here that I actually paid retail for. I got these little canisters from my mom. I got the new curtains, the fabric from my mom to sew that. These jars. I'm a little bit cautious about what I get at secondhand stores just because I really want to know what was in them. With jars, I generally kind of avoid jars unless I feel like I can super sterilize them, because some people have had paint in them. You know, some people use their, if they don't use them for canning, they use them to mix paint, or they have other nasty things in them. So I am kind of careful about that. I feel a little different about something like this, where I'm pretty sure they weren't, you know, mixing paint, you know, paint thinner or anything in it. For instance, I have a really big bowl that I use for dyeing wool, and if I ever sent that to the secondhand store, I don't think I'd really be comfortable sending it to the secondhand store, because after you've dyed wool with conventional dyes, it has heavy metals that stay in the residues, and so I don't want people eating off of that, so I would probably have to throw that away. And for those of you who send things to the secondhand store, I think we need to be conscientious about that and not be harming other people. The one exception to that was I did have one of those lanterns that was the propane lanterns that has those wicks that are radioactive. I did take that to the secondhand store. I assumed that people understood that they're radioactive because it's the nature of the tool. Does that make sense? But I put it in plastic, hoping. Anyway, it makes me a little nervous. I'll stop talking. Hey Renee, how are you? Thank you, Guinea. Is it Guinea or Ginny? Ginny, I like that. My great-grandmother's name was Kizzy, and Ginny kind of reminds me of that. All right, so the next thing is a compost. You need to have a compost when you're off-grid, because if you don't, you're going to have garbage stacking up. You need to keep it sorted. And I know this doesn't maybe feel like it belongs in the kitchen, but it does. Anything that's happening on your property relates back to your kitchen. If you're not composting, if you're not heating up your waste. So I have paper towels, I have an eggshell, and I have dead matches in this. And the reason this is important is because it's usable later in a garden, and compost that has a lot of carbon in it retains water, so you're not having to haul as much water. You don't want to put plastic in it, you don't want to put anything that's shiny in it, but you need a compost, and keep it open. You don't want to close it in. That's when compost gets stinky and starts to breathe things. We empty this about 4 times a day, and every time we take it out, we wipe it down with a paper towel so that it stays clean, and it's good to have it be attractive. This is a bread pan. But if you're not, how did that get in there? That belongs to my little rotary grinder. That must have been what fell out of the basket. Garbage builds up very quickly when you don't have a garbage man, and so if you're in an emergency, the likelihood of you having a lot of plastic wrapping would diminish a lot, because if you're not shopping a lot, you're not getting a lot of plastic in. Keep your plastic separate. If you burn plastic, it does put carcinogenic matter into the air, so it's not so great to burn plastic. But you could, keep it in one spot, minimize your plastic, because it's the one thing that you cannot compost. Everything else you can compost, as long as it, and even if it is shiny and it is nasty and you don't want it in your compost, you can have a separate compost bin that's just for things that need to compost down, that you won't be using for food, that you just need to kind of segregate off by itself. So think of those things, they're really important. Let's see, was there a question? Hello Alicia, how are you? Let's see, what else do I have? Okay, canning jars. You use these for canning. We also use these for goat's milk. They're easy to sterilize. They are universal. I use them in my spice racks. And with these, I also use them for food storage. And even though they're clear, doesn't mean they have to be exposed to sunlight. These ones go underneath my wood stove. And let's see if I can show it to you. Under my wood stove, there's just a little bit of space under there. And I have these trays that I put the jars into, and I think they're quite attractive. It doesn't have to be ugly. And then I have to tip these a little bit to get them underneath, but once they're underneath, I only put things underneath the stove that I'm not using a lot. If I don't get them out very often, then they're not in my way. And I just have to bend it under and then lift it back up, because there's a decorative edge on the bottom of the stove that kind of gets in the way of setting it up straight, but it will sit up straight. All right. Whoops. Okay, guys, I've got a new phone, and it's, there we go. Alicia McNamara said, will you do a video on your spice rack? I will. I keep forgetting that I didn't do that. Sometimes when I get into a big project, I'm just like, get it done, get it done, get it done. Because, and this is the crux of living off-grid and in a tiny house at the same time, there is no excess living space. We just did the floor, and we had to leave for 3 days to let it off gas and to let it not be sticky anymore. And when I got back, it was really frustrating because I wanted to touch up the paint a little bit, but instead what I had to do was put all my furniture back where it belongs so that we could function. It's easy to function and have a lot of peace in a tiny house and off-grid, but it's very difficult to do that if you get outside of your scheduling. If you get outside, if you move anything, you need to make sure it's exactly where you want it, and that it's easy to get around, because you have such very little space. But it's very kind to your soul once you have it established, because the only things you have around you are the things you love. And that makes my heart sing. I have nothing here that I don't love. And I got to show you this one, because I have it right next to my sink. And I don't know if Helen watches a lot anymore, but she made me this needlepoint, and it's right next to my sink. And it's of Kaya doing her needlepoint, and it's of Paige out there with her pony. And I love these. And these are the only things I have in my home. And so whenever I'm in my home, I feel like I'm in this sacred place. And it makes me a little teary, because I've had so many people that have sent me these beautiful things. But I'm not cluttered like this one. That's a needlepoint as well that they made. It actually says DPH. You can't see it from here, but I have it on my wall. I have my grandma's little ceramic measuring tape. Not measuring tape. That's in the sewing kit. Measuring cup. And so it feels like you're surrounded by love and warmth. And it's hard for me to leave it. When I'm not here, I'm not as settled. I'm not as happy. And I think that's kind of what the movement is about. The off-grid and the tiny house movement is about being surrounded by what you love and taking out the things that don't feed your soul. And the process for me is as important as my surroundings. I love this process. I love being able to make my tea and hauling the water and having the kids haul the water and see them get stronger. All of this is very, very important to me. So those are the tools. We do have an Amazon store set up. We're trying to get these products onto our actual Dirtpatcheaven, but for right now, all we have is the Amazon store. I do have the pressure cooker there because it is my favorite. It is not inexpensive. We bought it at our local King's. I don't know, not everybody has a King's, but it was our local tiny little co-op type store. And we didn't buy the biggest one because this is not for canning. This is for cooking. If you're going to use one for canning, you need to get the one that has the lock and that has the gauge that tells you how many pounds pressure, and you use that for canning. You could use this for canning, but it will not be as safe as using one that has the gauge. If you're in an emergency situation, you could use this for canning. Just know that for meat and things like that, you are taking a risk. And the book that you need is the Blue Ball Canning book if you're going to do canning. And you can do hot pack canning, or you can do pressure cooking, pressure canning. Pressure canning is for meat and vegetables and anything that is not highly acidic. Hot pack canning is for things that are acidic, things that have a lot of sugar in them, pickles, jams, jellies, that kind of thing. And I get more excited every time I talk about it. And my kitchen looks so pretty. I've got so much that I was able to get done. It's kind of exciting. Oh, Barbara said she enjoys our YouTube videos. Thank you so much. Did you see or find a co-op in Tulsa? I didn't. We were kind of limited. I'm trying to remember why we didn't. It's kind of hard for me. I don't know if you guys have noticed from the, actually I'm done with the kitchen stuff. I'm going to go in there and talk. I want to show you what the rest of the house looks like. These things on the stairs, they need to go back under the stove. We've got the stairs painted white so that it's a little bit nicer. I need to move the fridge back, but other than that, I'm pretty much done. All right, so let's see if I can fit this back the way that it was so we can talk.